Desperately wanting something can actually work against you, and in this video I'm going to break down the science behind why that happens and share 3 practical solutions that shift how this pattern actually works in your brain. Now most people assume that if they want something badly enough and they just grind hard, they'll eventually get there. But science shows that when wanting becomes constant and intense, it can actually work against you instead of helping you. And there are 3 reasons for this. We'll go through each one and then we'll get into the solutions. By the way, if you're meeting for the first time, my name is Prakhar. What I'm sharing isn't just theory, it's what I learned from building companies and negotiating multi-million dollar deals under real world pressure. Now the first reason comes down to is dopamine. Dopamine is the chemical your brain releases when you want something, and it's not really the pleasure chemical the way most people describe it. It's closer to a motivation signal. It's what generates, that feeling of I want that or I need to get that. But what most people don't realize is that your brain doesn't just produce dopamine randomly, it maintains a natural baseline level of it. That baseline is what keeps you feeling steady, normal, and motivated on a day-to-day basis. For example, picture it like a bathtub full of water, and that water represents your dopamine baseline, which is your natural drive and energy. Now, every time you intensely want something, like obsessively checking your bank account or refreshing your email or your analytics over and over, constantly thinking, why isn't this working yet? It's like scooping a water out of that bathtub and tossing it outside. Now, one scoop doesn't matter, you probably won't even notice, but if you keep doing that all day, every day, that level of water slowly drops. And when it drops, your dopamine baseline drops right along with it. That is exactly where the problem starts, because the depleted dopamine baseline doesn't feel like focus or drive, it feels more like restlessness, like a lack of focus or of fatigue. Like you want to do something, but nothing feels satisfying enough to actually commit to. And the strange irony is, the more intensely you want something, the more you slowly drain that exact motivation you need to actually go and get that thing. Now the second reason, it builds directly on that first one, because once your baseline drops, you naturally start to feel more anxious, more stressed, like just something's off. And there is a second thing which is happening simultaneously. So every time you think about what you want, you're reinforcing one specific message to your brain that I don't have this yet. And your brain at that time doesn't interpret that as an ambition, it interprets it as a problem that needs solving. And when your brain shifts into a problem solving stress mode, it narrows. And researchers call this tunnel vision. So your perception, it literally at that point of time contracts. So you become less open, less aware, less able to spot the things around you that could genuinely move you forward. And I've lived through this myself. There was a specific stretch in my life where I was completely obsessed over one specific outcome in my business. I was constantly checking numbers, I was replaying every decision, overthinking every single move. And if I look back, I think some of the worst calls I had taken in that exact period. And it's not because I didn't know better, but because I was so logged on to that this has to work, that I just stopped seeing anything outside of it. Now, a very simple way to picture it is like, say you're trying to fix one particular strategy in your business, and you become so fixated on making that one thing work that you completely miss signals pointing towards something else that would have even been easier or maybe even better. And that is what precisely happened to me. And at that time, after a few weeks, once I had time to mentally step back, the better options were suddenly obvious. And it's not because anything outside had changed, but because I wasn't trapped in that tunnel anymore. So put those two together, reason one drains your motivation, reason two narrows your perception. So you end up exhausted and half blind at the same time. Not exactly a great place to be trying to create anything from. Now here's the one that actually changes how you see all of this. Because we don't really want the things we think we want the feeling we believe those things will give us. So you don't actually just want the money, you want the security, the freedom, the relief that money represents. You don't actually want your business to hit some specific number, you want to feel like you've made it, like you can finally relax. Think about whatever you're chasing right now and genuinely ask yourself, what feeling am I actually after here? Because here's what happens when that question gets unasked. You spend years stuck in that constant wanting mode where you're reaching and straining and pushing, and even once you achieve something, you don't actually stop to feel it, you just quietly move the goalpost further out. And I know this pattern intimately because I've lived inside of it. At that time, you cross the finish line and there is nothing there, just another finish line waiting a little further ahead. And it's not because the goal itself was wrong, but because the feeling you were actually chasing was never going to show up through achievement alone. You have to let yourself receive it. And constant wanting is the exact thing that keeps holding it at an arm's length. So the real question becomes, if that's genuinely how this system works, what's the alternative? Because just stop wanting things obviously is not a realistic answer. So I'll share the solutions, and the first one is stop waiting for the thing to actually arrive before you allow yourself to feel the way you want to feel. Now that sounds very simple, but it's honestly one of the harder things to actually practice, because our minds, they're wired around earn it first, feel it later. Neuroscience gives us a good reason to flip that around though, because your brain runs on two distinct systems over here. One are the wanting circuits and the second one are the liking circuits. Wanting circuits, they fire when you're craving something or you're anticipating it or you're striving towards it. Liking circuits, they activate when you're genuinely appreciating something in the present moment, when you're actually feeling grateful. When you're stuck in wanting mode, those liking circuits, they stay mostly dormant and your dopamine baseline, it stays depleted. But when you practice real presence, real appreciation, even briefly, the liking circuits, they switch on. And over a period of time, that baseline, it starts to rebuild. You start feeling the exact feeling you've been chasing, not because the external thing finally showed up, but because you gave yourself access to it right now. And a very simple way to practice this is, once a day, pause and ask yourself, what if this right now was already enough? Not as a reason to stop being ambitious, not as an excuse to stop building, just as a moment of actually landing, of receiving what's already here. Even a few minutes of that, it shifts the energy you bring into everything else. Now you don't need to overthink it or turn it into some formal ritual. Just once, maybe today, pause for a minute and instead of thinking about what's next, look at what's already there. Maybe it's your work, your progress, your life exactly as it is right now. Not trying to convince yourself it's perfect, just genuinely noticing it without immediately trying to change it. That alone, it shifts something. Now the second solution is about identifying what's actually driving the intensity behind the wanting. Because underneath most desperate wanting, there is a fear. And until you actually find that fear, it quietly keeps running the show without you realizing it. So ask yourself, if this thing I want never happened, what am I actually afraid of? Not the rational sounding answer, but what you genuinely feel underneath all of it. For most people, it's something like, I'll fall behind, I'll be seen as a failure, I'll have wasted my time, everyone else will pass me by. And things like that, this fear, it creates urgency. And urgency creates pressure. And pressure, as we've already established, it kills flow, narrows perception, and drains your baseline. The wanting was never really about the goal itself, it was about trying to outrun a fear. And the moment you name that fear clearly, something shifts. Not because the fear vanishes, but because you're no longer being driven by something you couldn't even see. And from that place, you can actually move forward from clarity instead of pressure. Now the third solution ties everything together, and it's probably the most talked about in the law of attraction circles, which is detachment. But I want to give it some real grounding here, because just let go is not actual instruction. Now what helped it click for me was that your brain at any given moment is processing far more than you're consciously aware of. For example, think about how a computer works or how your laptop works. You type something into a search bar and a result appears instantly. But you never see all the code running behind the scenes to make that happen. And you don't need to, because if you would, it would be overwhelming and honestly useless to you. The machine, it works precisely because you're shielded from most of what it's actually doing. Your mind, it operates the same way. There is a huge amount of things happening underneath the surface. For example, pattern recognition, connecting dots, spotting opportunities that you just simply can't directly observe. When you're gripping the outcome, you're essentially trying to manually override that entire background process. You're getting in the way of your own machine at that time. But when you detach, when you do your part and then release the need to control exactly what happens next, you stop interrupting that process. Your stress comes down, your perception opens back up, and the things start moving in ways that often feel like coincidence but really aren't. That's not mysticism, that's simply your nervous system doing what it was built to do once you get out of its way. The real shift isn't wanting less, it's changing your relationship with the wanting itself. And the clearest place I've laid that down as an actual process, not just as a concept, is in the Joe Dispenza video, in which I talk about his complete manifestation framework. That's the one to watch next. I've added the link in the description down below and on your screen, and I'll see you there.